Greetings and salutations, viewers and listeners. Welcome to another episode of Game Break. I am Charles, coming to you today with another episode of World End Economica. We are going to try and wrap this up before New Year's. Now, last time round, we had just snuck into second place in that financial competition before we had to pause. And it looks like things are slowly potentially working out between Hal and Hagana and Hal and Barton and everybody else. So how about we dive right back in and see where things go from here. For the moment, we were in second place. Only 2 more times. If we could do that again 2 more times, we could defeat Mister Troche. That excitement blew away all that fatigue and sleep deprivation. We had set foot upon new territory. No, more accurately, it was Hagana's program that led me right into the footsteps of a deeper place within me. But even then, it wasn't against the idea. I wasn't against the idea. If there was something I could give to Hagana, I was determined to give her everything. An email from Barton arrived on my computer. Interesting, it said. Barton, who paid the sponsorship fee and could look at the trading history of all participants in the trading contest, could believe that we had gone a step further based on our trading history. Saturday night, that excitement was a helping hand as Hagana and I researched stocks and updated her program in my room till 3 in the morning. But no matter how much willpower was replenished, the body has its limits. Pathetically, I was the first to give in, and I slept that day. Hagana said she had more things to think about and got up, but given how often that had already happened thus far, I paid her no heed and continued to sleep. Light fell upon the desk as Hagana tapped her terminal, but the call of sleep was enough that I paid absolutely no heed to this as I slipped back into unconsciousness. That was why when I awoke suddenly, I thought it was strange. I figured I had neglected to go and use the toilet, but I realized that wasn't the case as I heard the sound of someone sleeping nearby. And it wasn't me. Oh. Huh? I wasn't sure whether I was half asleep or not. What I did know was that Hagana had gotten into my bed and was sleeping next to me. Or rather, I wasn't sure whether next to me was the right way of describing the situation. Hagana's hands were tucked close to her body as she slept like a baby in the fetal position. Her face was above my right shoulder, her forehead was against my cheek, her hand clutched my pajamas. The side of her foot was on top of mine. Hagana's body temperature was rather high, enough for me to wonder if she might have had a fever. But more so than it just being abnormal, her high body temperature was similar to that of an infant. That was why, I suppose. Though I was surprised when I realized that she was sleeping next to me, I didn't think of anything beyond that. Besides, I wasn't exactly filled with guilt about it. I was more filled with the notion of hopefully not waking up Hagana, as well as a sense of happiness. This was the first that I'd known how comfortable it was to be attached to someone like this. Before long, I succumbed to sleep, and morning soon came. It's not like I had to set an alarm, so it felt like I could just sleep forever, but I woke up at the usual 7 o'clock a.m. Though I'd only slept about 3 to 4 hours, today I woke up on the dot as usual. Immediately, I thought about Hagana. She really was still clinging on to me as she slept. Actually, we both woke up at the same time. The awakened Hagana looked blankly at nothing in particular. She was basically slipping out of her half-asleep state, and I could see that she didn't know where she was. Perhaps due to fatigue or sleepiness, she had simply forgotten where her bedroom was. That's what I thought when Hagana closed her eyes and curled her body more. She then yawned loudly and looked at me, who was rather close to her. And with the usual intense look in her eyes, she spoke. "Your snoring is loud." Never heard that one before. Anger and a strange kind of happiness were hanging dangerously over the room. The only reason an accident didn't occur was that Hagana quickly, or rather a bit too quickly, slipped out of bed. In the morning light, Hagana's beautiful hair fell smoothly along her back without a strand of bed hair. She murmured in a delightfully low voice as she stretched, and I could see the line of her body clearly as her pajamas rustled. Hagana's body heat lingered in the futon, as did her fragrance, which was clearly not from shampoo or body soap. Courtesy of the phenomenon called morning glory, I couldn't exactly get out of bed at this point. Oh, for Pete's sake. Hagana tapped the terminal on the desk to start it up, and she turned towards me with it in hand. "How long do you intend to sleep?" She said with a disdainful look in her eyes. Even with her contempt, I couldn't really make excuses, and thus I replied, "Give me 5 more minutes." Hagana thought about it for a moment and nodded. "I'll come and wake you up in 5 minutes. She walked briskly out of the room. 5 minutes was more than enough to get prepared. Again, I spent that day in the living room entirely with Hagana, devoting all our time to updating the program and analyzing stocks. It was around afternoon when we had someone stop by. I figured it would have been Chris or Toyama, but surprisingly, it turned out to be Siralt. "You haven't come at all lately, so I figured I'd stop by instead." I hadn't called for him, but I was thankful for the juice and snacks he brought. Lisa basically didn't buy that stuff, after all, and I was not used to buying it, as it would be a waste. I took a can of dark carbonated soda, one of which was developed on Earth, and in one way or another held near complete control of the market for 100 years, while Hagana drank 100% pure orange juice. Both of them were imports which, compared to the synthetic stuff, were several times more expensive. That was rather considerate of Siralt, I thought. "So, you two are looking awfully friendly with each other." He teased with those words as he put his hand around my shoulder and took a peek. The rustle of his hair was enough to startle Hagana, who was next to me.
Siralt, don't bother them.
Before I could even complain about it, Lisa said it for me. Siralt looked up and shrugged his shoulders. What, really?
Really?
I wasn't sure whether Lisa was copying me or Siralt, but in either case, that was what she said. Still, it was without a doubt that it was for real. Hagana and I had long ago surpassed the level of just playing around. Hey Hagana, are there any bugs in the program? Siralt continued his antics and said that to her. Hagana turned towards Siralt in her chair, looked directly at him, and spoke.
No.
That's straightforward. Her response was enough to elicit a laugh at his expense, and Lisa smiled as she patted Siralt on the shoulder and consoled him. But as Hagana was in the midst of turning back towards her terminal, she realized something, stopped, and then spoke.
It's an impressive level of completeness, in my opinion.
I looked up and turned around to see Siralt staring blankly. Then, like a good, responsible adult, he was smiling ear to ear. Next to him, Lisa had a gentle smile on her face as Hagana turned back to what she was working on. One way or another, everything was in front of us as we moved forward.
Well, with that said, we'll be getting out of your way then.
Man, after taking the time to come by too.
Oh my, are you saying that you aren't satisfied with my company?
And that's what Siralt and Lisa talked about. Perhaps, owing to the fact that they were around the same age, Lisa seemed to be speaking more frankly than usual. That's not it, but there isn't the excitement of getting to know someone for the first time though.
Oh my, since when was our relationship like that?
I looked up briefly and saw Lisa smile boldly with her arms folded. Siralt saw this and put his hand around Lisa's shoulder. Seeing this kind of annoyed me. That's a harsh way to put it. Beaten down by the rain, did you not have an inclination to offer a helping hand to save me? Was that not love then?
It is love, and in total seriousness too.
Those words startled me. Lisa was into Siralt? Speaking of which, Siralt had boasted before of sleeping on Lisa's lap. On top of that, seeing as this was the first time Hagana met Siralt, it was highly possible that Lisa and Siralt had been together in the church before. An adult man and woman getting to lay his head in her lap to boot. Honestly, that did agitate me a bit. Could it be that Lisa and Siralt were...
But Christ loves everyone equally.
And just like that, Lisa ducked under Siralt's arm, and he did look disappointed that Lisa slipped from his grasp.
Sorry, okay?
You sneaky woman, you.
The Lord will love you whether you act virtuously or otherwise, so you don't need to worry about it.
I've fallen for a troublesome woman.
Such a liar.
As Lisa chuckled, Siralt scratched his large head. I wasn't sure if this was real or just some joke, but they did earnestly appear to be close. And while I looked at those two, I realized that something pointed was directed at me from right next to me. Hagana was scowling at me. Uh-oh.
What are you doing?
There was very little time remaining for us. If we were to overtake Mister Troche in first place, our focus could not become fragmented. Hagana's anger was rather considerable. I turned back to my computer quickly and resumed work. But somehow, Hagana continued to look displeased, much more than usual. In the end, that day Saralt ate dinner with us. Saralt talked a great deal, and Lisa seemed to have more fun than usual. Also, before he left, he stood in the church with Lisa, and they had an honest talk about the debt. Lisa laughed and evaded Saralt's questions. Even if it were a joke that Saralt liked Lisa, he was almost certainly another of Lisa's rescues. According to the policeman I'd overheard while I was escaping from the Lunar Chinese restaurant, Saralt had something of an amazing background. It was possible that Saralt succeeded in the highly competitive world that was Newton City, and had somehow fallen from grace. Besides, he didn't seem like a bad guy, and deep down, appeared to be rather serious-minded. Maybe he'd heard about Lisa's debt and wanted to help her as a way to pay her back. But I couldn't imagine that he would have deep pockets. Just listening to the conversation, I came to the conclusion that he did, in fact, live inside the Big Bull Cafe. Granted, Lisa didn't look like one to do anything arbitrarily, so I was somewhat relieved. Why I was relieved, I wasn't quite sure. But in any case, I was relieved. I stopped stealing glances at them and went back to my room. In my room, Hagana was updating her program. When I got back in, we continued our banter back and forth right where we'd left off. I wasn't sure if that forcefulness was more over the top than normal, or if it was just me overthinking. And then, on that day as well, Hagana and I slept together. She seemed to cling to me even more than she had the night before. Someone's fallen for someone. Starting from the following Monday, there would be only 3 days left for trading. 100 million mools left until we reach Mister Troche. Profits per day of 30 million, 30 million, and 40 million would be enough. It can be done. It will be done. With that enthusiasm, trading began. But as soon as Hagana and I started trading, we started to feel uncomfortable. An hour elapsed when it evidently became clear what was strange. After a few more hours, when the root of the problem was discovered, it was certainly surprising. Uh-oh.
I can't calculate this with math.
Hagana murmured, dumbfounded. After finishing my trades frantically, I felt exhausted too. We only managed profits of 10 million mools. With that, the hurdle was raised to 50 million and 50 million for tomorrow and the day after. To make things worse, at one point in the morning I thought that victory was at hand, only to fall into despair now. The problem was very clear. The number of participants had dropped off significantly. All participants were given 40 days to conduct trades, and after that, participants who were done leave one by one. New people would come in at the same time. However, there were only 3 days left in the contest, so a large number of people had already run out of time. Certainly, those numbers would gradually begin to decrease. However, considering that a large number of contest participants either had part-time work or were doing this at their own leisure, I had expected that many of them would be trading the days before and after the weekend, before it all came to an end. If the number of participants decreased, then the flow of capital would decrease as well. There's no point in wanting to trade 100 million mools if no one could even match 80 million mools. Hagana and I managed to reach 260 million mools in funds, and with leverage at the time of trading, that would turn into 780 million mools usable. Today, on Monday, the number of stocks that we could throw these funds at had diminished. By Tuesday and Wednesday, it was already a certainty that the flow of capital would have dried up. This was bad. It became an exceptionally bad situation.
What should we do?
Hagana asked me a question. I had relayed to Hagana what I was pondering and what I could think up. Thus, I was dead certain that as she spoke, she could guess my response to some degree. We have no choice but to throw funds into a large company. I wasn't sure whether or not mathematics could be applied to such a stock, though. Rather, there must be others who were thinking the exact same thing we were. So I could imagine that tomorrow, and the day after, there would be a certain number of stocks that would be focused on for trading. Would mathematics be able to see through that? I looked at Hagana, but her eyes showed uncertainty.
Fewer stocks will make these statistics more unreliable.
In that case, we'll just have to increase value within a safe limit. It was a rather simplistic conclusion, and thus we had no choice but to go along with this simple idea. We were like fish searching deeper and farther as the water dried up around us quickly. Thinking in that manner, with Mister Troche having finished trading when he did, it was like he saw the situation we were in now. Genius. He was a genius. But we managed to pull within 90 million mools of that genius. It was a dizzying pace to get to third place, and things came together once we hit 200 million mools. Time mercilessly continued to flow, and soon it was the start of Tuesday. Hagana stayed up all night analyzing the trading data from Monday and updated the program to increase the range of available possibilities. I thought I'd give her a hand, but instead she said that she'd prefer that I get some sleep. Specifically, she said that there would be no problem if she fell asleep, but all would be lost if I did. It was rather sound and thus hard to refute, and for a change, I slept before the date changed. Though I only slept with Hagana twice, I found it surprising how cold it felt to sleep by myself. Then, when Tuesday trading ended, Hagana and I did not exchange a single word. There was the possibility that we were simply tired. But the root of that silence was that things weren't as profitable as we thought. A gain of 22 million mools. We couldn't even hit our quota. That left us with 68 million mools more to go. Participants dropped off more than on Monday, and the scramble for the last scraps of the pie were ferocious. In the middle of it all, Hagana was on the verge of tears. Her program was completely off the mark. Somehow, we arrived at second place. Or rather, third place dropped off considerably, and second place was now a practical certainty. However, at this point, we'd only received 50,000 mools. Once Lisa's loan was paid off, then that was that. I wondered if the reason Hagana didn't just say to quit at this point was because that 50,000 mools felt more to her like a borrowed sum. And on that note, I hadn't done any trading on the real markets, so my funds hadn't increased at all since then. At this point, if Hagana were to trade by herself, by the large, she'd still be able to make money. Certainly, if I was out of the picture. Hagana's proportion of earnings would increase as well. If that were the case, 100,000 mools wouldn't be out of the question, would it? If I could, I wanted to leave her with as much to work with as possible by way of funds. 200,000 mools. I felt that it was the least that should be there, given how hard Hagana and I were working. After dinner, Hagana and I looked into the current possibilities. There were now only two choices available. One was to do what we did today. The other was to narrow things down to exactly one stock.
A single stock is dangerous.
Hagana said that suddenly. But it would be impossible if we went with more stocks. The amount of funds for trading was ridiculous, and though anything could be purchased, it opened up room for more mistakes. At this point, we were more like a prominent whale in a dried-up pond. More like a beached whale like out of a film, though. Unable to move due to such an enormous body, blowing out salt water in anguish. Once a purchase was made, the price would go up, and all the others lying in waiting would sell at once, setting the profit amount. This would drop the price back down, and we would have no one to sell our large amount of shares to. If we sell them off carelessly, in the face of very few buy requests, the only thing left would be to throw in the towel. The price will go down, and once low enough, a sell-off will begin. Going in through margin selling, the same thing will happen. In the end, the exact same thing will happen in reverse. In order to avoid that, we had to be able to move our huge body around. In other words, focus on a single stock and trade with full force. By grabbing and twisting up all that selling pressure, a higher price could be forced. If prices could be raised artificially while the last trades were made, then we'd win it all. I wasn't sure whether or not monsters lurked in the last 10 minutes of the investment contest. If nothing else, with Mister Troche having already finished trading, right now at this moment we were the giants in the marketplace. I realized that in order to win, all that could be done was to force prices up artificially and hold out till the end.
Will everything be okay?
That was all Hagana could ask. We have no choice now. That was all I could respond with. The room fell quiet during the night, and mere silence held complete control. Whether you laughed or cried, in less than 20 hours, victory or defeat would be decided.
It doesn't seem like I can do much else now.
Hagana suddenly said that. Huh?
Hal's greatest strength is my greatest weakness, after all.
For a time, all we literally did was eat and sleep together. At the very least, we were in agreement on that. Well, I suppose so. When I said that, Hagana looked downcast as she nodded. At least, it appeared that she was downcast. At the brink of victory or defeat, I came to the realization that my abilities were not enough. When I'd first met Hagana, I figured without a doubt that that was the case. But things were different now. Everything was in reverse. Honestly, I felt a pain, as if a part of my body had been severed.
It's too bad, though.
That's what Hagana said. She then tapped her terminal, and with a peculiar beeping sound, the light went off. If Hagana were an android, it would be the perfect sound for her if she had been deactivated. With the light off on the screen of the terminal, suddenly the room seemed barren, as if all that enthusiasm up until now was all a joke. That silence returned. Even after the power shut off on her terminal, Hagana did not get up from her chair. I understand Hagana's feelings to the point that it pained me to do so. To have gotten this far and not be able to keep going was indeed painful. Of course, she could watch over my shoulder. She could also try to offer some advice while running the program. However, the number of stocks under consideration was limited. It was an undeniable fact that the more we had to rely on massive swings, the less useful Hagana's program would be. It was evident that much as Hagana's program consumed me, the reverse could be said as well. It really was painful. Thus, it must have been painful for Hagana. Right now, looking at the side of her face as she appeared on the verge of crying, I wanted to say something. I tried desperately to make myself think. Was there not something, anything at all, that Hagana could do? I considered every possibility. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that I thought back on everything that I had talked to Hagana about. There must have been something. It's not possible that there wasn't anything at all. Barton had said that excellent quants would turn everything about a trader into numbers. If that was the case, then there had to be something. And then Hagana sniffled and stood up from the chair.
Good night.
With her short utterance, she made for the door without even looking at me. Instead of her terminal, she had her folded-up pajamas in her hand. I was surprised as I wondered when she had grabbed them, and something in my heart throbbed as I realized that she had intended on sleeping in here tonight. And so, in that brief moment, I grabbed her arm. It was a rather reflexive thing to do. Hagana's wrist was slender and small, but the bone was firm, and there was a slight bit of flesh and soft skin upon it. I could feel her body temperature. Hagana turned around and looked at me. Looking back at me, her eyes showed unfounded tears. After being sold on Earth and having run away from home, perhaps this had happened before. I couldn't imagine that Hagana's parents were happy to sell her off. Certainly, when Hagana ran away from home, her hand was held just like this. However, that couldn't buy Hagana her freedom or stop her from being sold, I suppose. Powerless, only holding powerlessly onto Hagana's hand. Perhaps, for a brief moment, Hagana had hope. If that weren't the case, then I would have been at a loss to explain the despair in her eyes when she first turned them towards me. Hagana looked downcast and tried to shake my grip off, but I continued to hold on. Hagana tried a second and third time to shake me off when she suddenly started to cry a bit. I didn't know what I should do. I knew that this was a bad situation. Seeing such an atrocity in today's society was enough to make me cry as well. Hagana used the side of her hand to try to loosen my hand. I applied force and could see Hagana's face show signs of discomfort. Hagana couldn't move. She could only give in to force. That's how it always was. Force. Movement. At those words, my mind wandered off briefly. It was a sensation as if my mind was being assaulted by messages from outer space, with a buzzing sound, or rather, what I imagined it sounded like. The third eye in my mind opened. Hey.
Let go.
Hagana sobbed a little as she said that. Hey. Hey, are you listening? With all my might, I pulled Hagana to me. Hagana's body was delicate and light. As soon as I pulled her close, she looked up from my chest.
What are you doing?
There is a way.
Huh?
There is a way. Your terminal.
What?
Your terminal. There's a way. There is something you can do. I said that to the teary, dark-eyed Hagana, whom I still held in my grasp. I reached out towards the terminal that was about to fall from her hand.
What can I do?
There is trade volume that's sleeping.
Sleeping?
Hagana repeated those words, then opened her eyes suddenly.
But that path hasn't been...
Exactly. There's the volume of all those who ended their trading with positions fully leveraged on margin. Someone looking from the outside wouldn't know how many were still alive. So, there's always a chance that sellers and buyers could be off in their predictions. If the trade volume wasn't enough, then all you needed to do was to wake the sleepers up. For example, imagine a stock that was loaded with people who had bought tons on margin and ended their trading. The margin trade volume was always open to the public, so one would know immediately who had been purchasing what. The problem was for sellers, particularly those who hoped to make a profit through price increases in what they purchased within margin buying. It isn't clear how much was still in play and would turn with them to sell. If roughly all margin buyers were out of commission, then the advantage would turn to us, the buyers. When prices go up, sellers would appear, and the short sales that worked would be taking their profit. But sales wouldn't come from people who are profiting with margin buy positions. When the pressure to sell weakens, those who are margin selling would get scared and pull out. And in doing so, buyers should come out of the woodwork having picked up the scent, creating an artificial price hike. And if the margin buys were alive and the price rises, then certainly they'll sell in order to take profits. With the market in an uproar, There would absolutely not be any level-headed individuals who could hold on to their paper gains and wait it out. Sell before taking a loss. Sell no matter what. In other words, if the price couldn't rise enough, then we would have failed. If within all that margin trading only we knew who was alive or dead, we would gain an enormous advantage through the psychological battle waged. Even now, with liquidity having dried up, this was the only way we could extract a victory in this battle. And Hagana's ability would be able to ferret out whether the margin buyers were alive or dead. We were aware of the ones ready to pounce on people who had ended trading with open positions by making opposing trades. And, riding on their actions, we can turn a profit. The relation between price fluctuation and ranking can be calculated with math. That kind of operation was Hagana's specialty. And we're going to have to see how that all boils down next time, unfortunately, because we are out of time. We've already run over. I really thought we'd be able to see the end of the financial competition this episode, but no, we're going to have to find out next time. So tune in for the next episode to see, are they going to be able to pull this off? It's the last day of trading. Is it going to be enough, or is it too little too late? I'll see you all next time to find out.